Hey everybody, you're listening to So Many Sequels. I'm Josh.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Garrett.
And I am David.
Today on the show, we're going to wrap up our Cloverfield series by talking about the Cloverfield Paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that exciting?
It is because I had no idea this movie even existed.
Really?
So it was a real shock to me.
The Cloverfield Paradox was released February 4th, 2018 on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
It was a surprise movie for everyone. There had been some... Was that?
I said even the actors.
Well, maybe. There had been some talk prior to it coming out about this mysterious movie called God Particle that this ended up becoming. But its ties to Cloverfield and all that were not really known unless you went pretty deep into the Cloverfield lore and viral marketing kind of stuff. So anyway, it was a surprise. They dropped a trailer for it during the Super Bowl that night, revealing that the movie would be available on Netflix immediately following the game. So big, huge reveal. First of its kind, really. This movie was thought to be released in theaters. Nope. Netflix.
Nope. They didn't.
In hindsight, probably the right choice.
Probably was. Hang on. Go ahead.
But that's it for the introduction, really. This movie had a slightly bigger budget than the last two. Was directed by Julius Onah. I want to say that's how you pronounce it. A little-known director at the time. His previous film was called The Girl Is in Trouble. This was his second movie to direct. And then since then, he made the movie Lucy. There was Luce. Do you all remember this? Luce.
Scarlett Johansson?
No, not that one. This was Naomi Watts and Octavia Spencer, and his Luce. I don't remember how they pronounced it.
Oh, okay.
But it came out last year, I believe. So another director getting his start.
Oh, it's like a weird horror movie, right?
I don't really remember. Yeah, I think it is some kind of thriller type thing.
I vaguely remember it.
Yeah. So this movie takes place in space.
The Final Frontier.
We've gone from a classic New York City backdrop to a scary Louisiana bunker to the outer reaches of space.
Right.
In this series.
And I would say this is definitely the most sci-fi of all of them, even considering
probably
the monster components and the alien components of the previous ones.
So the first movie was Cloverfield is a found footage action type movie. The second one is a dark thriller. Mm-hmm. And this one is like a sci-fi horror. So while they all feel somewhat similar in certain ways, they all manage to hit different genres, which is fun. I'm trying to think of the positive things I can say about the movie because it's not overly great. It has its moments, but I'd seen it. I'd seen it before. Garrett has seen it before. Andrew has still not seen it. And David, this was his first time to see it. So what were you guys' thoughts as first-time viewers? I'll go ahead and let Andrew answer, even though he don't.
Go ahead, Andrew. What do you remember between the moments of blackness for you?
I love the cast. The cast was great.
Yeah,
good.
Y'all didn't tell me Daniel Bruhl was in this.
I don't know who that is.
He's Zemo.
Watching this movie
from Captain America: Civil War.
Watching this movie, there's a lot of like B-list stars where you would be like, oh, that's that guy or girl, but you would not know their name or where they're from unless you saw their face, and that is the cast to it.
A lot of journeyman actors. There's a lot of people that are in like a lot of different things here and there. Been in TV and movies. The reason I bring up Daniel Bruhl, he's in Captain America: Civil War. He plays Zemo, the main villain of that movie. So I saw him. I was like, oh, here we go. I know this guy. And Chris O'Dowd from IT Crowd. I've seen the main actress in a few things, although I can't. I should have written it down. And then Elizabeth Debicki from. I've seen her in a couple of things now, but she was in The Night Manager. She was in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, things like that. So there's it's a pretty good cast, pretty good, and good overall representation if that's a goal.
What else about the movie, Andrew, besides cast, do you remember?
He don't know.
He took a nap. He don't know.
That's about all I can compliment on it.
The blackness of space was equal to the
What
blackness
you
of
think
his
about?
eyelids.
What did you think about the story?
The story was pretty good. I will say that there were times when I felt like it was getting predictable.
Mm.
Like it was like you don't know why they're in space. You don't know why they're on the ship. Why the beam? I think the beam was like trying to activate,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden everything just goes completely haywire. I like the surprise elements. The woman in the wall took me completely by surprise, and how everything just kind of just looped around into another dimension. I think that was a good way to. I think that was a good plot point. I don't think they wrapped it up very well.
You were asleep during that part.
Maybe I was.
They wrapped it up.
You still seem to get most of the plot, though. You worked that part out.
What about you, David?
Well, I think an alternate title for this could be Cloverfield Deep Space Nine.
Boring?
Because,
Boring?
Yeah,
Deep Space Nine's boring.
Not entirely boring, but I thought it was better than Cloverfield: The Next Generation because they were stuck in one place, as opposed to being on a ship.
Sure.
It plays. I mean, this, in my personal opinion, this movie plays like a Star Trek fanfic, but a little bit gorier and a little bit scarier in places. They have obviously some more gruesome deaths, but you have like an international team of scientists and astronauts, and they have some sort of vague ranking and system, who's in charge. There's and then, something goes wrong and they didn't do something quite right. Now they're shifting between parallel dimensions. I mean, Worf literally did this in an episode or two of Star Trek in which he was going through different alternate timelines where he knew this person, but this person didn't know him, or he had this person has children, but this person doesn't have children in the alternate timeline. It's a very popular trope. The problem here is, in my opinion, that the characters of this movie aren't really I'm not as invested in them as I would be in a TV show where this type of thing might happen. This kind of thing could easily happen on an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or something like that. It's a very
if you're like up to date on
TV
Agents
show
of S.H.I.E.L.D., it very much could be.
Like it's a very TV show style script, and I think in general it works. It's fine. Like it's not like anything overly special. I wrote that I wasn't bored, but I also really wasn't excited. So I was just kind of somewhere in the middle for most of the movie. I think that the one character they give us a real reason to care for, I did care about. I thought that Ava, who is sort of our central character, we get a real sense of who she is and what she cares about and what her purpose on this mission is. But everybody else is just kind of like there to be killed, like, so it's kind of got I guess you could say that's a pretty traditional horror trope of there's only one real character that you can invest in and everybody else is just sort of, fodder for the deaths. But I mean, I don't really know what else to say in terms of the story. It's, they're trying to activate this super collider. They're in the year 2028. They're trying to save the world's energy crisis. There's constant wars or rumors of wars going on planet side. We have actually a dual narrative because Ava's husband on the planet is like a doctor, and we actually spend some time with him. And he saves a girl from a hospital that blows up, and they go hide in a 10 Cloverfield Lane style bunker for some of the movie. And but that story seems somewhat underdeveloped compared to our main story in space.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
much of the
yeah.
core story are these characters in the station. When I do think that the more interesting story is kind of what they're doing,
Mhm.
which doesn't work well with the horror theme they've set up. Because what they're doing, like you said, trying to solve the energy crisis, they're astronauts on the Cloverfield station, which is orbiting Earth, and the idea is that it will provide Earth with like all the energy they would ever need. But there are conspiracy theorists, as we see in the beginning in the newsreel clips.
Donald Logue.
Donald Logue, that they believe it will open basically parallel universes and horrible things will happen. And now that's a cool story.
Yeah, he uses the
And
phrase
what we see
chaos.
more of is like astronauts and different like jump scares.
Yeah, the way this plays out is, there's a lot of, interesting stuff. The problem is, I feel like they did a too good a job of foreshadowing, because they would give you the moment of foreshadowing, and you're kind of like, oh, and like you kind of knew exactly where, like Andrew said, you kind of knew exactly where some of these things were going to end up going. It all builds to a moment where we had a conversation similar about this with A Happy Death Day to You, where our main character is presented with one of those ultimate difficult choices. She can stay in this reality where her kids are alive, or she can go back to her own reality where her kids are dead. Problem is, in this reality, she's still alive too. So they're not her kids necessarily. These are kids that have belong to someone else, that are hers but not hers. I don't know. It's very confusing, but ultimately she makes, I guess, the right choice. And then the movie just kind of like ends prematurely. So
Fair enough.
Yeah, it doesn't really end with
what
closure.
what about you, Garrett? You've seen it before. You talked about last week about seeing it right after the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Josh and I watched it at the same time, 2018, and my brain's all over the place today. I was into it this time for about 2/3 of the movie, and then that last third, I was so far gone that it really ruined everything, and I still can't pinpoint why or what changed, but I was into the chaotic mess that they had created. I was in. Maybe it helped having watched Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane back to back before this one, and they were fresh on my mind, and I saw a lot of parallels between those two movies and this one, where you don't really know what's going on. I mean, you kind of why they're up there, but the conspiracy theorist talks about ripping space-time open. You don't necessarily know that's what's going on until later on in the movie. It's just another weird, anything can happen in this Cloverfield universe that they've created. And so I was really into it. Some of the horror I was really into when Volkov's eye got all jacked up, and then he threw up the worms, and like all of this weird stuff started happening, and I was really into it. And then, man, I still don't know the moment, but I wrote down in my notes, I was like, I'm actually really interested in all of this stuff, into the story. And then later on I wrote, I don't care, I just want this to be over. I think they did a good job with the horror aspect of it, in my opinion. What I don't think they did a good job of was making me believe that what they were doing was going to save the Earth. I think that had we spent a little more time on Earth and that story develop, and give me a reason why we need this energy source, give me some kind of time crunch, because they've been up there for 2 years working on this thing at this point in time, when the chaos is happening. And so give me a reason why you need this energy source. Make it like a dire strait, in addition to a dire strait of what has been caused up in space. You can leave the monsters as a surprise, which they did in this one. when they're coming down at the very end, the original Clover monster jumps up out of the clouds, and that's what scared Andrew out of his slumber. But I just didn't ever really feel a sense of urgency except for that moment of when the horror stuff was happening. And for me, it was the astronauts trying to save their own lives because all of this chaos was happening. That was a sense of urgency, but like the energy story, after they figured out what happened, you didn't really see any like monsters causing big destruction. And I think that made me lose that sense of urgency because I didn't see it until the very end when Michael is like, all of a sudden, tell them not to come back. Tell them not to come back. And then the monster shows up. And then there's a sense of urgency again. But without that, it was just dead weight.
Yeah. Yeah. This movie continues the trend of there will not be a direct sequel probably to this. No. So you're kind of left with like, they all end with very like, I don't say draw a direct allusion of this, but very Twilight Zone endings where it's like, and that's just the end. You'll never know exactly what happens after that, although you have a lot of questions. And whereas the questions at the end of the first Cloverfield made the movie more interesting, I feel like here they don't. I feel like the questions you're asking after this movie are just kind of make you go, I kind of just, it makes me wish the movie was better.
Yeah.
That said, like I said, I don't think this is necessarily horrible. My lack of expectations or hype going into this movie were non-existent. So, or excuse me, I should just say my expectations were non-existent. I watched Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane right before this, so I was interested to see what they were going to do, but nothing here made me go, oh yeah, this is great. It's just kind of like, yeah, this is okay. This is good. Yeah.
Well, the story's not compelling.
It's not overly compelling, no.
Right.
It's not. Like it's when I was watching this movie, I was thinking of the movie Event Horizon.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of similarities between the two. And I'm like, this is just Event Horizon. I don't know what's different about it. It's cool that it's sci-fi. It's cool that they've explored all these different genres, but it just doesn't. I feel like at this point they're copying.
Mm.
I think for me, what they could have done is I think this particular movie, rather than, and I don't know exactly how they would have done it, rather than it be the catalyst. So you have to think of it in terms of this movie really is the reason we have Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane. They're up there doing that energy source, and the conspiracy theorist was right. They ripped a hole in space-time through different dimensions and caused chaos across 3 different dimensions independently. And I like this idea. But I think that this movie could have been more compelling, at least for me, if there was no different dimensions and that these movies took place over a course of time. And Cloverfield was the first one, and that Clover monster was the scout, for lack of a better term. Yeah. He was sent down here to see what it was like. He communicated back to his alien brethren. They came down, and that is what happened in 10 Cloverfield Lane. The timeline there doesn't necessarily make sense because of the fact that had that first monster come down, John Goodman's character in 10 Cloverfield Lane would have already been in the bunker. But let's just pretend that this timeline goes along right now. And so these astronauts were sent into space to find some kind of energy source in order to defeat these monsters that had come down over the course of these 2 movies. I think that kind of urgency, and that implies some kind of a battle, and that they had been able to, there's been this war going on for 20 years. And then now they're finally close enough to getting that. I don't know. I think that may have worked a little better. There's still some nooks and crannies that wouldn't have like weaved as well. So it's not perfect, and I do like the idea of this one central event has caused such chaos across so many dimensions. But this movie itself as the catalyst just doesn't, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care about this movie. I care about the results based on the first two movies, but this one is just there.
I talked about it last week, I think. Even if they give you an explanation for the Cloverfield incidents and the thing and what happens in 10 Cloverfield Lane, it's going to be underwhelming. And I feel like that's kind of the problem here is they went out of their way to try to give you enough of an answer as to why this has all happened. And unfortunately, there's not quite enough clarity because they try to keep an element of mystery. They try to keep an element of making you believe that this has almost nothing to do with Cloverfield until the last few minutes. And then they're like, see, it has to do with Cloverfield. And then the audience is forced to draw their own conclusions as to how exactly all that happens, which was great in the first Cloverfield movie, is drawing your own conclusions. But here, they give you all this information that just makes you go like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel as cool as it could. And it's almost it would almost been better left as a mystery. And this is just, like Garrett said, this movie takes place in the future of a world in which a monster, baby or otherwise, or an alien invasion took place at some point in the mid 2000s. Instead of trying to like find like a weird way of creating it like a self-creating universe, self-creating a paradox event where this happens across multiple dimensions and multiple timelines. We talked about last week how there were a lot of rumors going in that Overlord was going to be a part of the Cloverfield universe. Apparently, T.J. Miller was under the impression that 2020, I think it was just earlier this year, the movie Underwater with Kristen Stewart was going to be in the Cloverfield universe.
Yeah.
So
why would he think that?
Apparently, he said, he wrote it on his Instagram. He was apparently under the impression that it was going to be another Cloverfield movie. And then the movie came out with literally no reference to Cloverfield. And he was like, guess I was told wrong.
Still want to watch it, though.
Yeah.
But Josh or Garrett, I'm sure both of you are looking into this. Do you want to talk about how this is another situation where the movie didn't start as a Cloverfield movie at all? It started as something totally different.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's almost the same story. This came from a spec script, just like 10 Cloverfield Lane did.
Mm-hmm.
Bad Robot, again, got a hold of it to produce. And just over time, they kind of figured out, hey, we could rework this into a Cloverfield movie. And that's essentially what they did. Now, I believe that like we talked about last time, 10 Cloverfield Lane didn't really become a Cloverfield movie until well into production. It sounds like with this one that they took the time to make it one before they really started, but still after the script was written initially.
Yeah.
So,
it was a movie called.
They were ready.
God Particle.
Exactly, God Particle. So they were ready to make this more of a Cloverfield one than they were with the previous movie. But, yeah. Again,
what were you gonna say, Andrew?
Just like with all these movies, the follow-up isn't necessarily intended to do that from right out the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Anyway, Andrew, what?
No, my only thing was like the timeline in which these movies, like the time span in between these movies, like the first Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane had 7 years, I think. It was 2008 No, that's 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 8 years in between those movies.
Yeah.
And in between 10 Cloverfield Lane and Cloverfield Paradox, there's 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 2 years, actually.
And they had this movie more or less done in 2017. So
yeah. So my thing is that like I wonder if, since this movie was written on a spec script, and it wasn't really intended to be in the Cloverfield universe.
Mhm.
I wonder if maybe they just tacked that on and just said, "Oh yeah, it's just Cloverfield." And I think if had they not done that, we probably would have gotten a little bit of a different movie.
Yeah, it would have been fascinating if this idea, because they had the rights to this script sometime in like 2012, I think, if I read that right, or maybe 2015, sometime between 2012 and 2015. Could have been interesting if this had come out second.
Right.
And then 10 Cloverfield Lane had come out. Then it might have been a really interesting situation. But I think there was a lot of pressure on JJ to, or at least he says, to have a Cloverfield sequel at some point. And they made that decision late in the game to make 10 Cloverfield Lane a Cloverfield movie.
Well, they need to stop that.
I don't know. It worked for
Yeah.
10 Cloverfield Lane.
I know.
Well, 10 Cloverfield Lane's fine, but I'm talking about like a movie like this, a movie like Cloverfield Paradox.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't get fully was some of the things in I understand, again, the ripples in space time and whatever, but there's some things that didn't make sense to me. So I get Elizabeth Debicki's character, Mina Jensen or something like that, being found in the wall. I understand that you can make that work. This particular Shepherd or Cloverfield station sucked into a different dimension. She stays there, and if that station evaporates from one, lands in the other in a different place, she could be in a wall. Okay, I'll make that work. But there are two things that I don't fully understand how they work, and maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe it's just me picking, but and they both have to do well. They both kind of have to do with Volkov. How to get the worms in him?
They did the same thing.
You think so?
Yeah,
And,
like
but
the shift
why?
happened. Well, because we see a moment where like the foosball table changes,
Yeah.
where like they're red and blue, and then they go and they just change and they're yellow. Yeah, I think
I
the
never even
worms.
noticed the colors.
When nobody was paying attention, the worms went and Volkov's just sitting there on the toilet, and all of a sudden goes, "Oh,
okay, fair.
Something's wrong with me."
I'll
And then
allow
later,
that one. Yeah, so I'll allow that one. But how did Chris O'Dowd's arm know that the gyro was in Volkov?
well, who the hell knows? Because his arm is operating independently.
Right. That one doesn't, like that whole scene. He's fucking Thing from the Addams Family, or and like it just doesn't make sense. That particular part really is the one that I was like, okay, how is this arm still moving?
Yeah.
And B, how does it know that the gyro is in Volkov?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only way that they would know that is if some of these events have already happened in this arm's universe, and so it knows that because it's lived that experience, and that's why the Jensen also has previous knowledge, because she's like, don't trust these people, they're bad. But it doesn't really like it. It's befuddling. It's sort of the sci-fi magic of like the arm just it operates on its own. It crawls around and it can write and it just knows things. It's very confusing. There's a lot of interesting, space tech. They have like these little nanobots that like electrocute them and it like fixes things. There's a lot of leaps of you had to suspend your doubt with this one even more so than you'd have in the previous ones.
Mm-hmm.
Suspend your disbelief, I should say.
And I really would have liked, I think, to gotten more from the Earth story.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen how that impacted what was going on there. It may have made me care a little bit more. And like I said, I was really into a lot of the horror aspects that they put in there. That's when I was most intrigued. I've never seen any of these movies, but I've got like very Final Destination-y vibes, where these people are in this dimension where they're not supposed to be, and in order for it to correct itself, the dimension is taking it upon himself to create these situations where these people are kicked out of that dimension in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that aspect of it. There were elements there, and again, for like 2/3 of this movie, I was really feeling it, and I was the only one. At least Andrew, Josh, and I were able to watch it together. I was really the only one that was into it. Andrew was asleep, but after that, I was like, okay, is this over yet?
Yeah, I really dug the death of Tam. She's the Chinese engineer of some sort. She gets stuck in an airlock that slowly fills with water, and it reaches, I don't know if there's the correct term, but critical mass, and the airlock can't hold all this water anymore, and so it ruptures the space lock, and it freezes. So the water, because space is like so cold that cold isn't even really a good word for it. Hyper freezes all the water, and she's just instant icicle. I was like, that's a cool death. That's something I've never seen before. Some of these other things I've seen before, but that was pretty cool. So I'll give it that. After it happened, I went, that's cool. That's a cool death. And you don't like her much, so it works out.
All right. Well, sound thrilled about this movie.
Do you have anything else to add, Josh?
I really don't. I kind of, if anything, I enjoyed it less the second time around. I think I enjoyed it more the first time because of the excitement and the hype of finding out this movie existed the same day I got to watch it. And
there's
something that you may be able to remember more than I do, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember? So when the first time that we watched it, I don't feel like either of us were into it very well.
I don't think super.
Do you? Because I've been trying to remember. Do you remember when that monster came out of the clouds? I felt like I thought it was stupid at the time. I thought it was really dumb. And I was like, you're just trying too hard to make it part of the Cloverfield universe. It seemed like it was disingenuous. This time it felt a little better. But I mean, that was years ago and things have happened since then, so I don't remember. But do you remember your reaction to that?
I don't remember feeling like that at all. I remember feeling just let down. I think that it wasn't as good as either Cloverfield or 10 Cloverfield Lane. After we finished watching the movie for the second time, I said that I feel like if this were the second one, I would look at it in a different light. If this came after Cloverfield and then the third one was 10 Cloverfield Lane, I think I might see it differently. But the drastic fall in quality from 2 to 3 is just too much for me to ignore, really. So, yeah. It's just a bummer.
Yeah. Well, would you like my replacement for the box office stats this week?
Yeah, I'm curious what your replacement will even be.
So, this movie was released exclusively on Netflix the day of the Super Bowl. And so as you might imagine, there's no real box office. The movie did not even get a limited release anywhere. But I do have some details. According to The Hollywood Reporter, and honestly, when I say I have some details, I mostly stole this from Wikipedia and then combined it with some personal research. According to The Hollywood Reporter's Paramount chairman, Jim Giannopoulos, felt that the film's budget, which had gone up to $40 million from $5 million, was too big to be profitable in a traditional theatrical release. That's when they cut a deal with Netflix. Netflix paid $50 million for the rights for the movie, so the movie was instantly successful.
Wow.
They made a $10 million profit off this thing. So as far as Paramount was concerned, they're done. They didn't think they were going to be able to cover that $40 million budget as it was.
Probably right.
Then, according to Nielsen. According to Nielsen's ratings, based on subscription video on demand, nearly 785,000 people watched the Cloverfield Paradox the night of the Super Bowl. This is what they determined from their studies. After 3 days, 2.8 million people had watched it, and they had 5 million after a week. So it's not necessarily super numbers. I mean, if you wanted to be really, really, if you wanted to do the math, 5 million times the average movie ticket price in 2018 was $9.11. So even at the average, not taking into account any kind of like 3D or anything like that, you're looking at like 45 million of the people who watched it the first week. So you get like $45 million opening week. So probably made the right choice putting it on Netflix. You know, you start off with a $5 million budget, which would be pretty easy to recoup, but special effects and various other things, you know, push it up to 40 million. Paramount was like, sorry, JJ, we're not riding it through with this one. And so, yeah, made profit for Paramount. They got rid of it. Netflix ended up with a pretty successful post-game movie. That said, if these numbers are accurate with the Nielsen rating, it didn't even draw as much as the This Is Us finale that day. So not necessarily the biggest thing that happened after the Super Bowl. And that's really it.
Your mic's muted, Josh.
Stupid Mike, I was muted. To be fair, it premiered late at night, so I feel like almost 1 million people within the few hours that still existed that day. It was pretty good, considering how many people just kind of super tune out after the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
What was the Super Bowl that year? Do you remember?
Is Super Bowl boring? I don't know.
Super Bowl
2018.
Oh, man, there's 2 Super Bowls.
Oh, that was the
Chiefs
Eagles
one?
and the Patriots, right?
Eagles,
Yep.
Patriots.
That was a good one. So, yeah, for people to tune in after that Super Bowl is impressive. That was actually a really good Super Bowl. This is when my friend went viral.
What?
This is when Harold went viral for his Eagles.
Oh, when the Eagles won for the first time.
Oh, right, yeah, when the Eagles won. Yeah, Harold, I won't say his last name. For fear that he, there's no point. Well, that's it. So Andrew won the letterbox game last week.
I did.
I did. Sorry, are you prepared, Andrew?
103 million people watched that game. Took me a while to find that. But there you go.
Pretty
All right.
I guess.
Super Bowl always draws people.
Yeah, still don't know why.
Yep. Well, so Cloverfield Paradox came out in 2018. What do we rate it?
You mean what do we think?
You mean what do we
Letterboxd gave
think?
it?
Yeah, what do we think letterbox wise on
Yeah.
a scale of 0.5 to 5.0?
I'll go first, and I will say 2.1.
David say 2.1.
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh, man.
I'll 2.2 you.
Right on top of each other.
2.2?
I'm gonna prices right you.
Okay.
What are you
so
gonna prices right
It's
me?
okay if it's 2.0, then I win. Haha.
I'm gonna go low and say 1.8.
Ooh, even lower.
That's low.
Okay. So
Get
Josh 1.8, Garrett 2.2, David 2.1.
One.
Okay. All right. So out of 85,000 people have seen this on Letterboxd, over 9,600 reviews. The winner with the correct answer is Garrett. with
Hey.
2.2.
2.2.
Price
Big
is
win for
right,
Garrett.
Bob Barker.
A big win for Garrett. Much needed in the contested, hotly contested letterbox game. Garrett now moves up to 3, tied with me. 3 even. Josh and Andrew tied at 4 apiece. Good chance for me to tie the others next week, or for Josh or Andrew to take a decisive push forward. We'll see what happens because Garrett can't win next week. So that's like the best news ever.
Yeah, no matter what, I'll still be in last in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, we will.
Sounds about right.
We will see. Eventually, we'll have to create like a little graphic for this, like 3, 4, 4, 3. That's it. Now we get to we got to spin the wheel. We got to pick our next movie.
Nah,
I'm sorry. Wait, we got to do our own reviews.
rate our own reviews.
I'm sorry. Forgive me for our absence.
I need to look at my scale. I think I know what I'm doing, but I need to check it.
So I will go first, and
Go ahead.
I've been going back and forth with myself, but I'm thinking about giving it a 2.5. I was going to give it a 3 initially, because I didn't feel like there was anything that was just horrible about it. It just didn't really do anything that was exciting. So I was going to give it a good because I didn't think there was anything. It wasn't like poorly shot, or the visual effects weren't necessarily terrible. The acting wasn't like so unwatchable. It was just, but I think that to really get like even a 3-star, there has to be some level of excitement that you get out of it. So I'm going to stick with a 2.5. It's a little disappointing.
I will go with 2 because on my scale, 2 is disappointing.
Disappointing.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with 2.5. And I I find funny. Here's what I find funny. Okay, so I have my letterbox pulled up. I decided to go with 2.5. I previously, after my first viewing, gave this movie a 3. I'm seeing. Garrett, you gave it a 2.5 the first time you watched it.
So
we've both lowered by half a point.
Interesting.
Without even realizing it.
Wow.
Not a conscious effort.
No.
Andrew?
I just give it a 2.
Regular old 2.
Yep.
That's going to be very easy to do the math for.
So wait, we had a
two twos
and
two
two
and a halves.
2.5s. Yeah.
That's a 2.25.
Yep, sure is. So we're looking at a 2.0.
Yeah, round down to a 2.0
guess.
on this one. Or I guess we could round up to a 2.5. I guess so we could put it up to a vote.
Yeah, because it's right in the middle.
All in favor of 2.5? All in favor of 2?
The
2's
yeah, we split it again.
It's almost like the 2 people that pick 2.5 put 2.5, and the 2 people that pick 2 pick 2.
Well, only 2 people have the password anyway, so.
That's true. And it's on the other side of the Zoom screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Do y'all want to know the Metacritic score?
Yeah, what's the Metacritic score? While you look that up.
14.
Yeah, it's let's see, whatever I would think it would be, and then subtract by 10.
20.
I'm gonna say a 12, a 19.
Okay, David, 19.
19.
Garrett,
22.
22.
Taylor Swift.
12.
12, 19, 22. The answer is 37.
Ooh. Cloverfield Paradox, not as bad on Metacritic as most things.
Yeah.
Only a few points below Back to the Future Part 2 for whatever reason. So what did you guys think of this movie, this series as a whole?
I like the series as a whole.
Yeah.
It's
I
interesting.
just don't love this one movie.
Yeah. This is the only outlier, and as far of a drop as I had watching this movie, it doesn't do anything to the franchise.
Right. And even though it does not do what it's trying to do well, I like what it adds, which is this extra stuff about the God particle and the space-time continuum and parallel universes. What it attempts to add, I like. I just don't think it's executed well.
Right,
Yeah.
because if we ever do get more Cloverfield movies, it just means that they don't have to be connected. They can all be standalone movies, which, in my opinion, it gives you a better chance of having a good movie be turned out, because you can make it a standalone movie with just these elements that tie in. It does not have to be like cohesive with everything.
No, you're
else.
not.
It has to have certain elements that you can work in, and this greater picture of the movie can be what it is.
Yeah, you're not handcuffed by the story that's already been laid down as much. It's kind of funny. It finally came to me what this is. It's an anthology series. This is the equivalent of an American Horror Story, but with movies. These are the Cloverfield stories. And so I think 2 out of 3 ain't bad if they ever do revisit this, which we talked about last week with JJ signing with exclusive deal with what was it, Warner?
Yeah, WB.
The state of the franchise may be in limbo, but the great thing is, because of how they've established the franchise at this point, they really aren't under any obligation to revisit it anytime soon. They could revisit it 10 years from now, and it would still fit just as well, because all you have to do is say it's in the Cloverfield world.
What if he ghost wrote the whip? What if he was just like in the back writing these movies and was like, "Here, I'll help you, but like I
Don't
can't.
tell anybody.
But like, I'm gonna do it.
Don't tell anybody.
That's
but
what
this
I
is a
do.
secret Cloverfield movie.
Yeah.
JJ, why are you talking like that? Don't. I'm not JJ. Call me Kelvin.
Kelvin.
Call me
All
Kelvin.
right, well,
That's my name.
let's wrap this up. We're gonna spin the wheel to figure out our next series. You're gonna have to watch our social media feeds for that, though. You don't just get to find out by listening to this episode.
Not yet.
No. So we're gonna sign off and do that. Keep an eye out on our Facebook and YouTube channels, especially for that video to come out soon.
Yep.
And we'll let you know what we're doing. We're excited. We don't even know yet. So find us online, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, search So Many Sequels, YouTube, and Letterboxd as well. So, subscribe to our channel and or the podcast, whichever you prefer. Really, you should do both because some things go on the YouTube channel that don't go on the podcast feed. So
Amen.
you don't have to pick between them. Just subscribe to both. All right. We'll be back later. Till next time.
There wasn't a pair of ducks in this movie.
A pair of ducks?
Yeah.
Yes.
Kept looking for the pair of ducks, the Cloverfield pair of ducks. Couldn't find them anywhere.
That may have been a better movie.
What an Easter egg.